A flotilla of Saudi oil tankers is slowly steaming toward the United States and into a chilly welcome for a U.S. ally. With the coronavirus driving oil prices to historic lows, all U.S. oil storage is expected to be filled in the next month. The Saudi move to occupy much of that precious storage space on the U.S. Gulf Coast has been called by some industry insiders an economic Pearl Harbor, a hostile attack on U.S. soil. A coalition of 13 U.S. senators from energy states goes even further, calling it economic warfare. Texas Senator Ted Cruz writes on Twitter, 20 tankers filled with 40 million barrels of Saudi oil are headed to the U.S. This is 7 times the typical monthly flow. My message to the Saudis, turn the tankers the hell around.
President Trump is making it crystal clear for the Iranian regime. The U.S. military will no longer tolerate Iranian aggression against U.S. assets in the Persian Gulf. In a tweet Wednesday morning, President Trump wrote, "I've instructed the U.S. Navy to shoot down and destroy any and all Iranian gunboats if they harass our ships at sea." This announcement comes just hours after the Iranian regime reported to have launched its first military satellite into orbit in violation of UN Security Council sanctions. President Trump's announcement also comes 1 week after the U.S. military reported 11 Iranian ships repeatedly making dangerous and harassing moves against U.S. Navy and Coast Guard ships in the Persian Gulf.
US President Donald Trump has suggested 2 new methods for cleaning the coronavirus from bodies of infected patients.
Supposing we hit the body with a tremendous, whether it's ultraviolet or just very powerful light, and I think you said that hasn't been checked, but you're going to test it. And then I said, supposing you brought the light inside the body, which you can do either through the skin or in some other way. And I think you said you're going to test that too. Sounds interesting. Right, and then I see the disinfectant, where it knocks it out in a minute, 1 minute. And is there a way we can do something like that by injection inside or almost a cleaning? Because you see it gets on the lungs and it does a tremendous number of the lungs. So it'd be interesting to check that.
They came to Germany claiming to be refugees from Syria's civil war. Now it's claimed they committed crimes against humanity during it, specifically multiple murder, torture and other serious offences.
The defendants are accused of having been members of Syria's General Secret Service. The accused is believed to have been head of an investigation unit, which was responsible for Damascus. As head of the unit, he is believed to have been the leader of investigation officers and personnel in a prison in which systematic torture occurred.
The older of the 2 defendants defected from President Bashar al-Assad's forces in 2012, before coming to Germany 2 years later. He was subsequently identified by Syrian refugees living here. He and his co-defendant were arrested in February last year.
Soldiers taking care of seniors. It's happening all over Quebec now and parts of Ontario. They're filling the gaps left by hundreds of staff who aren't working anymore because they've tested positive or are too afraid of the risk. And now hospitals in Quebec are starting to see COVID-19 spread within their wards. As Mike Armstrong reports, some say it's a time bomb waiting to go off.
With just about every day that passes, this Montreal Cancer Centre changes its practices, reacting to the threat of COVID-19. Cancer patients showing up for treatment have their own door. They're also called the day before and pre-screened. They're asked if they have symptoms of COVID-19. That said, some nervous their treatment could be put off don't tell the truth.
In one case, someone was COVID positive and came in there, and so the nurses had to leave and be quarantined and be tested.
Our starting point this morning, South Korea and the United States are conducting their annual combined air exercises this week, and they are an apparent warning to North Korea, which continues to ratchet up tensions on the Korean peninsula. Now, the annual air exercises were postponed last year as Washington had been attempting to coax the North back to the negotiating table, efforts that fell on deaf ears.
Seoul and Washington have convened their combined air exercises annual drills that were skipped over in 2019. The allies decided to postpone their air exercises last November as a goodwill gesture from the U.S. to encourage North Korea to return to stalled nuclear talks. The drills, which have been taking place from Monday and wrap up Friday, appear to be targeting Pyongyang following the regime's continued missile testing.
South African Airways' business rescue practitioners say they have no further funds for rescue efforts and that the airline cannot survive beyond the end of the month. The practitioners say they do not have sufficient funds available to continue honouring the obligations of SAA to its employees beyond 30 April 2020. According to them, two options remain: a wind-down process or placing the company into liquidation. The wind-down process is dependent on employees accepting the termination of their employment by mutual consent within a given time frame. Government met with some of the unions representing employees at SAA on Tuesday. It was made clear at that meeting that the airline can no longer depend on financial support from government after it turned down another 10 billion rand bailout.
Israel's new coalition government, a deal between Benjamin Netanyahu and Benny Gantz, means the possibility it will annex parts of the West Bank is now much more likely. In a virtual session of the UN Security Council, the man in charge of Middle East peace efforts for the United Nations said that would be a disastrous step for peace in the region.
Mr. President, the dangerous prospect of annexation by Israel of parts of the occupied West Bank is a growing threat. If such a move were implemented, it would constitute a serious violation of international law, deal a devastating blow to the two-state solution, close the door to a renewal of negotiations, and threaten efforts to advance regional peace.
COVID-19 is pushing countries over the edge when it comes to dealing with China. Sweden's relationship with China has been souring since 2015. But now it seems to have taken a definitive turn for the worse. The Nordic nation has shut down the last remaining school for Chinese language and culture. The Chinese state-sponsored teaching program has been brought to a halt. Confucius Institutes are funded by Beijing. The textbooks used in them are also scripted by Beijing. Sweden has clamped down on them, citing security concerns. It isn't the first to do so. In January this year, the University of Maryland in the US too cancelled the Confucius Institute affiliated with it. The reason? Allegations of Beijing trying to politically influence academics.